they were a set of photographs of a UFO, classic saucer, big saucer with a big dome on the top of it that had hit. It was it was snow everywhere in the photographs. They had hit, the craft had hit into this field. And so I put them in this microfiche machine, this overhead microfiche machine. And then I traced the symbols that were on the bottom of the dome of the UFO.
There were symbols on the UFO.
Yes. Yeah. And I traced them all out and brought them back to Jesuit headquarters, showed Father William Davis, my Jesuit superior, and Father Davis bent down and slid open the drawer of his desk and pulled out an 8.5 by 11 manila folder, and I unclipped it and pulled out an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO in flight.
Hi everybody, Danny Sheehan is one of the most prominent figures in the UFO UAP field, but he has also been involved in countless other big political and legal matters over the years. And that became pretty obvious at the start of our conversation. Just minutes before he came to the microphone, Danny had sifted through the recently released JFK files, so he was absorbed by that. And even before I had come to the part where I was going to introduce Danny to the show, he had enthusiastically given a fascinating 25-minute lecture about the JFK assassination and its surprising connections left and right. So that's why this episode has two parts. First, you get the main UFO UAP part, and towards the end, you get the JFK part. The latter part was posted as a separate video about a week ago, so some of you may have already listened to that. Danny is a true treasure trove of knowledge about this world. I hope you enjoy the show. Danny Sheehan, welcome to the program. And I must say that I'm thrilled and honored to have you here because you're one of the most prominent and knowledgeable people in the UFO field, especially in the circles that push for disclosure. You're the founder of the New Paradigm Institute, whose purpose is exactly what I said there, disclosure. But you are so many more things which we have just gotten evidence of here. We could do, I guess, 3 or 4 podcasts. But let's dive into the UFO field, the UFO topic a little bit more here now after this long
introduction,
fantastic introduction about the JFK assassination, everything connected with that. You actually, I heard you on another podcast the other day. I think it was the Area 52 podcast, and you said that originally because you're a constitutional lawyer, but you originally wanted to be an astronaut. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was going to be an astronaut, and I was going to go to the United States Air Force Academy directly out of high school, and I was one of the top 3, at least, candidates from the state of New York for the senatorial appointment. And so in the spring of 1963, same year that the president was assassinated, that I went down to be interviewed by Jacob Javits, who was the United States Senator from New York, to get the senatorial appointment. And when he asked me why I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, I told him I wanted to become an astronaut. He said, "Why do you want to become an astronaut?" And I said, "Because this is remarkable." I said, that in our lifetimes, we're getting set to actually go into outer space, and we're going to I want to get to be part of it, getting to meet the other beings that are out in other star systems here in our galaxy. And he said to me, "You actually believe that there's other beings out on these other star systems?" And I said, "Well, sure. I mean, so do you. You're a United States Senator." I said, "You must know that, and he was completely flabbergasted that I would say that to him, and it kind of disarmed him. And he said, "Look, I wasn't expecting this kind of a conversation with you, a little podunk high school from way up in the Adirondack Mountains." But he said, "I've already given the appointment to the Air Force Academy, my appointment to the son of one of my major financial supporters. That's the way it really is, Danny." He said, "That's the way, but I'll give you the appointment to the Naval Academy." the senatorial appointment, and then you can become a pilot in the Navy. I said, I'm not into boats. I'm into airplanes. I want to be an astronaut. And he said, well, look, you can get the appointment from your congressman. You don't need the senatorial appointment. Each congressman gets an appointment as well. He said, who's your congressman? I said, it was Carlton King. And he said, oh, I know Carl King. He says, I'll give him a call and have him make sure he gives you his appointment. Well, Carlton King gave the appointment to the kid who was number 7 in our congressional district in the state of New York, who happened to be the son of the Republican mayor of Glens Falls, where I was born. But the kid was, so I said, this is a bummer. Our government seems to be a little out of tune here. This isn't really working. I'll need to become a lawyer. And so I decided I was going to become a lawyer and then help retune our government a little bit. And then I could get back to becoming an astronaut.
Yeah.
Right? And then get to go.
It's not too late.
Well, it turns out that in the first few years that I was out practicing law, I ended up doing the Pentagon Papers case for the New York Times. I did the case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources, developed an awful lot of confidential journalists and stuff to share information. And then I did the Watergate case, with F. Lee Bailey, discovering that our Central Intelligence Agency people and Brown Brothers Harriman had been instrumental in killing the president. And so I just said, wait a second, our government isn't just a little bit out of tune. It's playing an entirely different song than we'd been taught, in high school, in college, and even in law school. And I said, there's something dramatically wrong here with our government. So I'm going to have to spend more time than I had thought, being involved in helping to fix our government. And so I was doing all those cases and ended up also on the side, as it were, being contacted because I went down to the Jesuit headquarters. I decided that the Jesuit order, the largest order within the Catholic Church, was the group that would be the best client to have. And I wasn't into representing Trafficante and the mob and stuff at Bailey's office, and even though I was enjoying myself representing NBC and in the New York Times at the Cahill firm, they came to determine that my interests and the interests of their other clients, the major corporate clients, was not the same, and so I ended up going to Bailey's office. So that was how, just in the first few years that I was out, I decided that what I was going to do is go back to Harvard College or Harvard University and do a master's and PhD in social ethics, to actually try to be able to engage with these guys, like the senior partners at the Cahill firm and the Bailey's office, trying to be able to persuade them that I thought that it was important for lawyers to be engaging in protecting the public interest, not just representing their craven clients, to try to get richer or more, to smuggle heroin and engage in assassinations of foreign leaders and stuff. And so I ended up going to the Jesuit headquarters because I was at Harvard doing the master's and PhD work in social ethics, and I was contacted and recruited from there to become legal counsel for the Jesuit headquarters down in Washington, D.C., in their social ministry office. And it was there that I was contacted when President Carter was elected.
Yeah, that's when you entered the world of secret UFO programs, wasn't it?
That's right. That was how I got brought into that. Is that I was contacted by Dr. Marcia Smith over at the Congressional Research Service, that she had been tasked as the head of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Services by President Carter, and asked to dig out all the information that we had about the UFOs, because Carter had seen a UFO when he was governor.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's fascinating.
So the first thing he did when he got elected, he was elected on November 4th of 1976, and before he even came to Washington, he was still down in Plains, Georgia, and he sent for the head of the CIA and had him come down to Plains, Georgia, to his home to brief him on the UFO issue. And it turns out that was George H.W. Bush, who was the director of the CIA at the time, and he refused to brief the president, saying that he had no need to know that, and refused to give him the information. And so President Carter, rather than taking on the CIA and George Bush, to whatever degree those two things were different. So he asked the Congressional Research Service to do the investigation for him. And so I got contacted by Dr. Marcia Smith, who was the head of the Science and Technology Division over at the Congressional Research Service, and asked if, as Jesuit counsel in their social ministry office in the headquarters in the U.S., I could get access to the Vatican archives and see if I could get information from the Vatican archives about UFOs and extraterrestrial life that we could share with the president. And that's how I was given access to the classified portions of Project Blue Book.
Oh, yeah. That was the long-running program, wasn't it? 20
years? Yeah, from 1952 to 1966, almost 65.
Okay.
And so that I got to see the classified portions of Project Blue Book, and it was there that I saw the photographs of an actual UFO crash retrieval. That they had photographs,
real photographs, no forgeries.
No.
You're sure of that?
This was in. I was there. I was at the basement of the Madison building with all of these files all laid out on these tables, and I was going through these, and there they were, the photographs of a UFO crash retrieval. There wasn't any doubt about what it was.
Wow. So what do you see? What did they look like? Were there pilots as well? Aliens?
It was interesting. They were a set of photographs of a UFO, classic saucer, big saucer with a big dome on the top of it that had hit. It was snow everywhere in the photographs. They had hit the craft had hit into this field, and it had plowed this big trench right through the middle of the field. So even in the snow, you could see the dirt all turned up where this big gouge had been cut in the field, and the craft itself was stuck into the side of a big snow-covered embankment. And it was sticking up at like a 45-degree angle, and I could see it in the photographs. And it was they were on microfiche. They were in these little film canisters, or little film strips like of microfiche documents and photos. And so I put them in this microfiche machine, this overhead microfiche machine. And so what I did is I took out a yellow pad that I had, and I opened it up, and I on the inside cardboard cover of it, the back of the yellow pad, I shrank the photographs that were in the microfiche onto the size of the pad, the notepad, and then I traced the symbols that were on the bottom of the dome of the UFO.
There were symbols on the UFO.
Yes. Yeah, there were symbols, and I traced them absolutely identical to what they were in the exact order of the half of it that I could see, the 180 degrees of the dome. I could see it along the bottom, and I traced them all out and brought them back to Jesuit headquarters. Showed Father William Davis, my Jesuit superior, because I was a candidate for the Jesuit priesthood at that point. And I showed them to Father Davis, and Father Davis bent down and slid open the drawer of his desk and pulled out an 8.5 by 11 manila folder with his little clip on it, and handed it to me. And I unclipped it and pulled out an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO in flight, And I said to Father Davis, I said, wait, where did you get this? And he said, my sister Dodie gave it to me. I said, well, where did Dodie get it? Because I'd met Dodie. I was at their family picnic over the previous summer. So I'd met her, and I met her husband, Mike. And I said, where did Dodie get this? And she said, well, Mike gave it to her husband, who is the head air traffic controller at the Seattle airport. And one of his best friends, who's a pilot that flies cargo all around up in the Northwest, took a photograph of this with his little brownie camera right out the window of his airplane. And he came back and brought it to the drugstore to get developed. And when it got developed and he saw that he had this photo of a UFO, he didn't want to get in trouble and lose his license by reporting it, because he knew that's what happened when people tried to report these things. They were ordered to go get psychiatric exams, right? And so what he did, he brought it and gave it to his best friend, Mike, who was the head of the air traffic controllers at the Seattle airport, figuring that met his responsibility. And then Mike didn't want to get in trouble. And so he brought it home and gave it to his wife, Dodie. He said, here, take this and bring it to your brother. He's a priest. Whatever that meant.
Yeah, whatever that meant.
And so, and that's the question we have. What does that mean? You know, why would people automatically think that a priest might be the appropriate person?
Well, it's an interesting connection to the spiritual aspect of this whole thing.
That is right, and the kind of ontological shock.
Exactly.
That it brings to people. It totally disrupts their entire cartography of reality. And that's when they go to see a priest.
Yeah, it's not supposed to exist, so maybe a priest can understand something of this.
Yeah, maybe they can tell us something about all this. And so that's how I got involved in it, and was later contacted by Dr. John Mack at Harvard,
who interviewed all these abductees, I understand.
Yeah. And so he had me represent him in front of the Harvard faculty committee that he got dragged up in front of when he published this book called Abduction, Human Contact with Aliens, and Human Encounters with Aliens. And so the bottom line is I got working with Dr. Mack, and Dr. Mack gave me a letter of introduction basically to all of the major players in the UFO community, because we were going to call them as witnesses to present to the committee. That was the faculty committee that was challenging his tenure for doing what he was doing and embarrassing Harvard University by making public his information about UFO stuff, and so that I got to meet almost all the major players, Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs and Steven Greer and Linda Moulton Howe and everybody basically, lining them up to be witnesses to appear in front of the committee. And so that all of a sudden I was into that world in great depth. And so I was later contacted by Dr. Steven Greer to be legal counsel for the Disclosure Project, and was involved in vetting the witnesses that Dr. Greer had gathered over time to present to the staff of the Congress. Actually, in May of 2001, we had a major press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and presented, 24 major witnesses, most of them all government people. The chief investigator for the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency, that had, copies of radar trackings of UFOs following aircraft, etc. And so we made that presentation. I was also general counsel for the people's hearings, the public hearings. There were public hearings on UFOs in 2013 that Stephen Bassett helped organize, and was later contacted by Luís Elizondo, who's the head of the top secret program in the Pentagon investigating UFOs, and he decided he was going to go public and reveal this to the New York Times. And since I had been one of the legal counsel for the New York Times doing the Pentagon Papers case back in 1971, Lou felt that I would be the right person to represent him. And we put together a formal complaint with the Defense Department Inspector General, complaining about the fact that the executive branch people in the CIA and in the Defense Department were lying to Congress, committing perjury to Congress, asserting that there was no evidence that there was that UFOs were real, that they were just swamp gas or mistaken flocks of birds, etc. That's what they were telling Congress, and they were perjuring themselves and in violating the Constitution, because the Congress of the United States has constitutional authority to have oversight over all the spending of the Pentagon. And here they were spending hundreds of billions of dollars, which they were basically embezzling from other programs that the Congress had appropriated money for. And so Lou Elizondo was complaining to the Defense Department Inspector General that the DOD and the intelligence community was lying to Congress, which he thought was unconstitutional. I think I I think I explained that to him.
Yeah.
What was true, that he was right in that, and so that's how it started.
Yeah,
And
and
so,
so you've been right in the middle of all of this all along. But for the general public, I think everything started back in 2017 when this New York
yeah,
Times article was out, and Luís Elizondo was the main source for that. But so now we're approaching present time. So if we can just go to the present time and talk a little bit about, or I want to hear you. I would love to hear you elaborate on 3 things basically going on right now, and is the documentary "The Age of Disclosure" that came out just a week ago or so. It's not out in the public. I've only seen the trailer, but it's supposed to come out soon. And then the significance of the latest whistleblower, Jake Barber, and also the process in Congress and the White House, and what you make of that. So those 3 things I would love to hear you elaborate on, because I know that you have so much information and so much.
Absolutely. Well, in the Age of Discovery, the Age of Disclosure, rather, that now is the podcast that Dan Herrera has basically co-produced with Luís Elizondo. There are 34 top secret U.S. government officials that all come forward in the documentary, The Age of Disclosure, testifying in detail, confirming that our government is in possession of one or more non-human origin extraterrestrial spacecraft, and the bodies of the occupants of some of these craft that have been proven now to be biologically proven to be non-human. Now, that's an extraordinary revelation. And here you have 34 top secret government officials telling you this, right?
Including
so that's
the Secretary of State, I understand.
That's right. Marco Rubio, who's now the Secretary of State, telling people that that this is real, and that in fact our United States government is involved in reverse engineering the technology out of the craft, and yet they're concealing the information, the whole technology of an alternative energy source, about the secrets of anti-gravity, the things that could be translated into valuable information for the people of the world, except that they're hiding it so that private aerospace corporations can get patents on it, and use it secretly to develop a new generation of weapons, so that the United States can establish full military dominance over the planet. This is a terribly serious misuse of this extraordinary information. So that's the first piece. That's the Age of Disclosure. It's been premiered a week ago down in Austin, Texas, and people were allowed to see this. All the 34 people that were members of it got to see what the final product looked like, and we've talked with a number of them who've seen it, so we know what's in it. Secondly, there's the Jake Barber interview that Ross Coulthart undertook, and Jesse Michaels has talked with Jake, and Jake is a high-level, top-secret covert operations operative who was also trained as a helicopter pilot, who was involved in the crash retrieval program that's codenamed Operation Immaculate Constellation. Is just the code name for it. He was one of the pilots that was assigned to engage in the crash recovery, and so he actually was interviewed by Ross Coulthart, who is the fellow who now has the regular series on News Nation television channel called Reality Check, and he interviewed Jake Barber, and Jake Barber not only gave a first-person account of recovering UFO crash debris.
And that's a novel thing, isn't it? It's a first-person perspective here.
It's the first person, not the first person who has provided the information. There are 40 people that we have brought to the Senate Intelligence Committee who, under oath, have given depositions now of being questioned by the staff of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who've given them detailed information about their participation in the crash retrieval program and in the reverse engineering program. There are people from both accounts that have given the information to the Senate Intelligence Committee. The Senate Intelligence Committee is still sitting on it. right? And they haven't held any public hearings on this yet. But over on the House side, the House Oversight Committee has held now 3 different meetings, 3 different public hearings, one of which was David Grusch testifying to the same effect. You know, in the David Grusch was a GS-15. It's the equivalent of a colonel. You know, he was a major in the United States Air Force, was a member of the global spatial intelligence service, which people don't even know exists. And he was also in the National Reconnaissance Office.
But he hadn't seen things for himself, had he?
Well, no, he interviewed these 40 people. That's how we ended up knowing who the people were to bring over to the Senate Intelligence Committee, to put them in front of them and say, here's people that are firsthand people that have put their hand right on a UFO. You know, who have, for example, Jay Stratton in the documentary film of The Age of Disclosure testifies right straight to the camera that he has seen personally the UFO craft that are non-human origin spacecraft and the bodies. He has seen the bodies of non-human occupants. And he says so right in the documentary. And he was, in fact, the head of the program, the OSEP program, the Advanced Weapons Special Access Program that Luís Elizondo was part of. And that's how Luís Elizondo got access to all this information. He was part of the OSEP program, which is a restricted special access program that you have to have above top secret clearances to be in, right? And so these people are all testifying now to Congress about this. So the pressure is on. And what's happened is the House Oversight Committee, which has had not only David Grusch come and testify, but also Luís Elizondo to come and testify publicly about the reality of these programs that are going on, and the reality of the UFO phenomenon, and the reality of this extraterrestrial species that is here, that are highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, obviously, but distinctly non-human, you know, and they're here, coming and going from our planet. And here they are testifying to Congress now. So what the House Oversight Committee has done is they've created a new special task force, the task force on the declassification of the U.S. government secrets. And that group of that task
led
force,
by this Congresswoman Luna.
That's the Luna task force, and Nancy Mace is on that. There are 7 Republican Congress people on that, 4 Democrats that are on it now. I just met with them on Tuesday to brief them on what it is that I know. I've testified in front of Sean Kirkpatrick, who was the head of the ARROW office, the All Domain Anomalous Resolution office that was created by Congress. The cat is out of the bag now. I mean, it's rolling. The cat is walking around now in the halls of Congress. You know, and people now are all figuring out it's time for them to get on board. They're going to be embarrassed over the fact that they've let the executive branch get away with this for so long, just lying to them and committing perjury. I mean, a significant number of the major people in the Senate and House have known that this has been going on and have done nothing about it. You know, so that we're getting on them now. The citizens are organized through the New Paradigm Institute. It's a 501c3 public interest organization that's been certified by the Internal Revenue Service to get tax-deductible contributions and stuff too. And the citizens, we're going to be organizing chapters in all 435 congressional districts around the country for the people to mobilize and get all the information about the things that we know about. That we've got the archives here at the New Paradigm Institute. That's where I am right now, broadcasting from. And we're gathering together all the information. We put together a major website and computer programs that are capable of crafting and customizing the information to be given to each one of the 435 congressional districts to let them know who their congressperson is, what committees they sit on, what their votes have been, you know, how supportive they are of the disclosure of the UFO information. so that we can have them be in communication with their Congress people and their United States senators. So we've also got, we're going to have 50 state offices of the New Paradigm Institute. They're citizens for disclosure. People are giving contributions to us that are all tax deductible, so we can actually finance the kind of computer system that we need to have to customize all this information and get it down to everybody so they can answer the questions. If their congressperson says, okay, you think I ought to be advocating disclosure, what do you think we're going to find here? They'll say, I'm glad you asked. Here, let us give you the information directly from your constituents. So that's what we're doing at the New Paradigm Institute right now. And of course, we're also, very importantly, designing a new paradigm worldview that can actually integrate this information that's going to be coming in with the disclosure of the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization. Many star systems of which are 5 or 6 billion years older than ours. Our sun is only 4.5 billion years old. Our planet Earth is only 3.5 billion years old. The universe is 13.7 billion years old. And we've discovered now with the James Webb telescope, we've actually discovered other galaxies way out toward the end of the universe that are 13.5 billion years old.
I read about that the other day. That's fascinating. It shouldn't happen. According to the old paradigm, it shouldn't be possible, but it is possible.
But there it is. And so that if there are, and there certainly are, inside that 13.5 billion year old galaxy, there are star systems and planets that have been in existence for 10 billion years. And our sun has only existed for 4.5 billion years. So they've had a lot more time to explore these fundamental questions about what is the nature of the origin of the universe? What is the ultimate unfolding of our universe? What is it moving toward? What is the relationship between consciousness, which they clearly are, and the material realm, which they clearly have displayed extraordinary capabilities at, because it turns out they run their spacecraft telepathically.
According to Jake Barber, that's how it works.
That's right. And that's true. We know that's true. They have a whole thing called psionics, psionic assist, programs working on how the helmet works that they found in the craft at Roswell, pursuant to which the pilot navigated the craft telepathically. And it turns out that these craft, some of them, are actually sentient. That they're like advanced AI computer systems, these craft, and that they actually have wiring that is made up of organic cells. And we're doing that right now. That because of it, where they're taking human stem cells and putting them into computers to actually generate the dendrites in synapses that are going to be operating in computers so that they become sentient. This is going on right now.
Our own UFOs.
This is all because of the discovery of this technology in the UFOs that we've recovered. And the national security state people are insisting upon keeping it secret. Not just because of them using it for weapon systems, but because they have these relations with private aerospace corporations, where they go to work when they retire, from the Air Force and from the intelligence communities, and they go and become executives in these private aerospace corporations, and they want them to have private patents on this technology so that they can make literally trillions of dollars into the future, requiring that our United States government purchase licenses from them to use the technology that we've recovered.
Which the whole humanity can gain from.
That's right.
What do you think will be, when there is open contact one day? What do you think will be some of the first gains that we will make from having this contact? Do you think it's going to be the consciousness understanding, or is it going to be technology, or what do you think?
Well,
all of the above, perhaps.
Well, that's right. Well, what it is, you have to have a kind of a hierarchy of issues here, and the most important issue to everyone is what happens to them when they die.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
That's the number
whatever.
one.
Oh,
On A.
my wife just died. My father or mother just died. Oh, I'm going to go see a priest and find out what happens. So, those are the things that people want to know about. And if there's some of these species are 6 or 8 billion years older than we are, they've been exploring that whole relationship between consciousness and incarnation. We're a consciousness that's incarnated in this particular physical body, but that all of the major faith traditions recount how upon the death of our physical body, our soul ascends. Either ascends into this nirvana state of unity with all matter in the universe, or it actually reincarnates in another life everlasting. We believe in the Holy Spirit, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. The fact is, they say it all the time and don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. But it's been there in the old Vedic text, for instance, for thousands of years, and other.
Yes, and
scriptures.
the secret's been laying out around in front of us all the time. But institutional religions seize upon it and capture the information and keep a secret even themselves from the laity. And they know about it in their monasteries, and they know about it in their temples and things like this. And they have secret traditions that know about this and how they can transform water into wine, how they can levitate and walk on water, how they can bring back the dead, how they can heal people by the touch of their hands. These are capabilities that our human family has. It's not just the ET people that have this, but the fact of the matter is that it's going to require disclosure, not only on the part of the United States government about the technology that they've recovered, but disclosure on the part of the major religious institutions.
Yeah, exactly.
They've withheld this information because back at the time they formulated all these major doctrines where they lay out these kind of mystical statements to people and then mandate that they believe them as a matter of faith, without ever really understanding what they're talking about, that they're going to have to disclose the fact that they know about these things and they know that our human family is capable of these things. And they've been, worried that if people got to know about this, that people could misuse these powers. They're powers of precognition, of being able to foresee events potentially in the future. There's the capability of telecommunications, teleporting, astral travel. There's all kinds of these things that they see the UFO beings do. Oh, the UFO being came into my bedroom and picked me up and passed right through the wall, or went right through the ceiling and elevated me up into and people are all going, holy mackerel, these ETs must be like angels. There must be like, maybe those are the gods that we all talk about, whereas in fact, people are capable of doing things like that. The avatars and adepts and stuff, you can dig a hole 10 feet deep and bury one of these adepts in there, and they bury them completely and walk away and come back a week later and dig them up and they get up and walk away. The human species is capable of doing so much more than has been revealed.
Yeah, but we've been led to believe differently, and we've
right.
forgotten the whole thing.
The third question that you asked, that was the Jake Barber conversation. The third question that you asked was, what's going on now over on the Hill? And what's going on right now is the United States Senate Intelligence Committee is just doing the final editing on, and is going to reintroduce and repass in the United States Senate the 64-page Schumer-Rounds bill that was passed by the Senate back in 2023. And this is the bill that not only mandates that all 6 of our U.S. military services, all 18 of our U.S. intelligence agencies, and all 32 of the United States Defense Department agencies, and all of the private aerospace corporations who possess any information or materials at all relating to the UFOs are mandated to have to turn this over to the National Archives, okay, in the classified portion of the archives, so that members of Congress who have the adequate clearances can get access to this, okay? That's mandated in that law, okay, which was already passed one time by the United States Senate and is going to be passed again, right, this year.
Why does it have to be passed twice?
Well, because the House of Representatives didn't pass the whole thing back in 2023. They only passed 23 pages of the 64 pages. And the additional parts that have not yet been passed into law require the setting up of a 9-person panel, for example, to review all of that information that is mandated to be turned over to them. And that person wasn't put in the House version. So the 23-page version just orders the agencies to gather the information together, but it doesn't require them to turn it over right immediately. Okay, and also it doesn't appoint the panel. It doesn't appoint the 9-person panel that would review all of it and make a decision to reveal to the public everything that's 25 years old or older.
And it also gives whistleblowers impunity, doesn't it? That law.
Not impunity. It needs to be stronger. That we have drafted, the New Paradigm Institute has drafted a 15-page bill, which is the enhanced UFO whistleblower protection.
Yeah.
That's one of the major things that's going on the Hill right now, is the fact that the Senate is getting ready to repass that statute, and they're going to send it over to the House. And very importantly, another thing that's happened is the head in the House of Representatives, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, Michael Turner, who was one of the major blockages in getting it approved by the House last time, has been removed by the Republican leadership. And he's been replaced by Crenshaw. And that we're working with his staff people now to try to get him to approve the full 64-page bill. And so that's what's major in the offing. The repassage of the 64-page bill by the Senate, the pressure now that's got to be brought on their House members to get, and that's why we're organizing in all 435 of the congressional districts, because those are the members of the House of Representatives. We've got to get those people to vote for this. We believe that as long as it can be put on the floor for a vote over on the House side by Michael Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, it will pass. You know, the 435 members of the House, 400 of them are going to approve this bill because they want to have the information too. Okay, so we've got the pressure on right now to get that to happen. And what the committee, this 9-person panel, is going to be doing is, in addition to releasing everything that's 25 years old or more, unless the president personally intervenes to prohibit one particular piece of information from being revealed, and he has to give his reasons for it publicly. That in addition to doing that, this 9-person panel is authorized by the bill itself to develop a UFO controlled disclosure campaign plan to give to the president. And there's going to be a lot of pressure from that team to get the president to agree to it and start to reveal the information step by step. Okay, that this is the disclosure process.
So this is really the age of disclosure. But there are some mixed signals coming from the White House, I guess. I mean, concerning, for instance, the so-called drone intrusions. What's going on? What's going on with those?
Well, it's interesting, obviously, but the reality is that there's a mixture of things going on with all those drones. But some of them
are actually drones. Right.
The most important feature, two features are, one is that a whole bunch of them are really drones, which I'll talk about. But there's some of them that are displaying characteristics that are completely different from any kind of drone that exists. That they are displaying the 5 identifiables that Luís Elizondo talks about, that are capable of instantaneous acceleration, the ability to travel at 40,000 miles an hour, in the atmosphere with no friction, are capable of going from the air into the water and traveling under the water at over 200 miles an hour. And some of these drones, some of these sightings that are going on right now display those qualities and characteristics. So these are not drones. These are what is typically referred to as anomalous phenomena, or UFOs. Okay, so but the drone parts of these where President Trump has said, "Oh, these are basically FAA approved operations." What those appear to be, and we suspect at the New Paradigm Institute, there's a special above top secret program going on based out of New Jersey, actually, where it operates from.
Ironically,
not coincidentally. And these are a special new drone that's been designed to be able to survey large areas from the air and to detect radiation. This is in searching for any particular nuclear device. If there's any kind of a private nuclear device that's imported into the United States or is stolen from someplace and it goes loose, that they can search for it. The problem, the challenge with that particularly is that those drones seem to have been secretly equipped as well with the ability to engage in facial recognition on the ground, and also to peer inside your house with infrared cameras to determine how many people are inside a house and where they're located, etc. That technology is being hidden behind one of the most sensitive programs of being able to detect potential loose nukes. And they're doing the same thing they do all the time, is they take advantage of the privilege that they're granted to adopt a special program that's surveilling areas inside the United States, and they're using it for political purposes, just like they did. We've caught them doing that over and over again. We found that at the place where our nuclear submarines are refueled, one of the most sensitive places in the world, an underwater island where they can go in and get refueled. And that's where they're storing the information that they use spying on political groups in the United States, in total violation of the Constitution. We found that. We found that where the nuclear submarines, because they're not able to surface and try to communicate, because if they surface and put up their antennae, they can be tracked by Russian satellites. So they've been trying to figure out mechanisms for the nuclear submarines. This is all classified information, but you don't have to be shot after I tell you. The bottom line is that the nuclear submarines have a device where they can settle onto the floor of the ocean, and they drive an antenna below the surface until they reach bedrock. It's a large antenna system, and then they communicate through extra low frequency communications into the bedrock of the Earth. And there's a location up in the northern peninsula of Michigan where they download or they upload all of those ELF communications. That's where they're hiding the Law Enforcement Intelligence Unit, this totally unconstitutional organization that spies on all United States private citizens.
Wow. Is Congress going to find out about this as well?
Yeah, if they talk to me, they're going to find out about it.
Okay.
Because I found out about this at Jesuit headquarters. I mean, that we have major investigators, and we have people all around that know about these things. And the bottom line is, but people are pretending that if we reveal these things about our United States government, that everybody's going to totally lose confidence in the government. Well, lots of people have lost confidence in the government already.
Yes.
They're lying and conniving and doing these kind of programs.
This is pretty obvious.
We're trying to fix that now. And that's what's ideally going to be going on over on the Hill. It's a lot more than just disclosing the reality of UFOs or even the reality of the extraterrestrial civilization. What it is, it's an attempt to cure these fundamental problems inside our American government that are causing the American people to distrust our government and causing people all around the world to distrust our government.
Now, you mentioned ontological shock before here. Are there any legitimate reasons why not to tell the people, because of the risk of that, or because of the risk of something else? Are there any legitimate reasons for the government to hide parts of this, at least?
Well, the problem is that once a person lies repeatedly to other people, people don't trust them. They don't say, "Oh yeah, I've been lying to you all the way, but I'm not going to do it anymore." And then they get caught lying a second time. And they go, "Oh yeah, okay, you caught me twice. But I'm promising now the third time I'm not going to lie to you this time." Right? Nobody trusts them, and that's the problem. And nobody should. And that's what the Constitution is all about. The American people are required to oversee the activities of their government. And the government is there to serve the interests of the people and the public interest, not to serve the interests of some private aerospace corporations or other oil corporations, or others that they've been doing for decades. That's the problem that's been going on, ever since the age of the robber barons. The robber barons basically ended up taking over the instrumentalities of government. And now that the corporations have been authorized by the United States Supreme Court to give endless amounts of money to the campaign contributions, under the anyway. So the United States Supreme Court has now authorized corporations, Citizens United, to give endless amounts of money to the campaigns. Who's going to be surprised that they do what the corporations ask them to do? And they craft, for example, the major pharmaceutical corporations have succeeded in getting Congress to pass a law totally exempting all the pharmaceutical companies from any legal liability, for whatever damage they cause by their.
Well, at least when it comes to vaccines, I know that. But
yeah, it's a vaccine. It's a vaccine court. And it's like workman's compensation. Workman's compensation. Everybody says, "What a great thing!" You don't have to sue your employer if you lose your arm in one of their machines because of their negligence. Oh, so we have a workman's compensation. You'll get $300 automatically from the workman's compensation thing. You say, "Excuse me, who are you doing the favor for here? It's for the major corporations, not for the people." And we've got to deal with all of that. And all of this is going to be coming up under the rubric of government secrecy, the deep state. This is the deep state. The people who know about about the secret that there's an extraterrestrial civilization all around us, and that they've classified that and are lying to the Congress about it. And to say nothing about the fact that the people from this extraterrestrial civilization are coming and going from our planet, and they're classifying that as well. The fact that we're shooting down their UFOs in order to gather information about their technology so we can make a weapon system to establish dominion over Russia and China, so that we can get what? So we can maintain our continued privileged access.
Exactly. I mean, that's
raw material.
I often find it very, it's philosophically untenable to talk about national security. I mean, how can this UFO thing have anything to do with nations at all? I heard you on another podcast say that you're not a big fan of the nation state, and I second that. So, what are your thoughts on the national security argument around this?
Well, I think that the nation state is a particular geopolitical entity that was conceived of during the Treaty of Westphalia, back in 1620. It was an agreement among the royal families in Europe that they would agree to recognize each other's exclusive jurisdiction over a given geophysical territory, so they wouldn't have to fight with each other, and they would get to dominate and control all the natural resources inside that geopolitical space. Okay, now that was an agreement made between the royal families, and what's happened that we've adopted that nation state mechanism now for insisting upon having absolutely exclusive control over the natural resources within a given area. Okay, fine, but the fact is that when you start arguing that you're going to go take the natural resources from another nation state, and you're going to do so by the exercise of military power or soft power through diplomatic coercion of these people, or for bribing them, or bribing their government leaders corruptly to be able to get oil contracts, to take all the oil out of their country and not allow their people to have the advantages of that. Okay, that's what the American foreign policy is doing. That's what the Russian foreign policy is doing. The Chinese foreign policy is doing. And what we've got to do is stop that. We got to stop that kind of aggressive activity of attempting to unfairly get access, privileged access to the strategic raw materials of people from another region. We have to set up a geopolitical structure on our planet where people can get fair access to the things that people need for a basic living, and the people who are owning the corporations who are trying to get patents and own these things uniquely to become multimillionaires, so they can get to have yachts and country houses and and have be able to buy sports cars for their their great grandchildren when they turn 16 to get to drive. It's totally unfair. These are unfair, sinful structures that exist on our planet. Okay, and at the Jesuit headquarters, that when I was there, that we passed the 32nd General Congregation documents advocating that we have an obligation every day of our lives to engage in the activities of disassembling the structural sources of injustice in both Eastern and Western civilization, in order to avoid a major thermonuclear war, in this case between ultimately China and us. I mean, there's constant threats of it going on between the Soviet Union and us, but the real threat is China.
Do you think that's the reason also why some of these ETs have been visiting Earth perhaps more frequently in the last 60, 70 years?
Yeah, as it comes closer and closer. The doomsday clock has been reset now, ever since the confrontation in the Ukraine began. Even during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we came within minutes of total thermonuclear annihilation of our entire human civilization. The doomsday clock was set at 2 minutes to midnight at that point. It's now been reset to 90 seconds before midnight. And just 2 weeks ago, they reset it again for 89 seconds before midnight. Okay? And the bottom line is that the extraterrestrial civilization, if in fact our planet is one of the comparatively few planets in the galaxy, not unique by any means, but one of the comparatively few that actually gestate life. That the flora and fauna of our planet is a valuable commodity, for seeding life elsewhere in the universe. And so if the UFO people are here, at least in part, to try to gather specimens of flora and fauna to take to other planetary systems where life is capable of being sustained, even if not generated to begin with, that's something that they're not going to tolerate, the total destruction.
And then again, I mean, perhaps we ourselves are a hybrid species from...
There's lots of speculation, but the fact of the matter is there are some things that are very clear. I mean, low-hanging fruit that we know about. And, people can go on and on about, the non-human intelligence that's behind the UFOs. These are extraterrestrial people. These are, it's everybody knows now with the Webb telescope and the discovery of all the exoplanets now. I mean, until 25 years ago, the scientific community wouldn't even acknowledge that there were any planets outside of our solar system, because they hadn't been able to see them and weigh them and measure them. It's the classic Newtonian Cartesian materialist worldview that they don't recognize anything that they can't weigh or measure, right? So the reality is now that we've seen that the planets are there. Now all the scientific community in the last 25 years are all saying, well, of course there's life elsewhere, because it turns out that there's at least 500 billion star systems just in our Milky Way galaxy. We used to think there was 100 billion. Then we put up the Hubble. Oh, look, what do you know? There's 200 billion. Then we put up the Planck telescope. Oh, what do you know? There's 300 billion. And now with the Webb telescope, they say, there's at least 400 billion. The fact of the matter is there's probably 500 billion. And turns out all of them have planets. All of them have planets. And at least 20% of them have planets that are in the Goldilocks zone, in that they're solid rock planets like our Earth. So they're capable of sustaining life, and they're capable of generating life, right? Some of them. Okay, and so that these are going to generate a sentient species eventually, and the simple fact is they clearly have. That's the point. They've clearly generated another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but categorically distinct, non-human set of species, and there's at least a half a dozen of them.
Yeah.
That are coming and going from our planet. We know what they look like. That people have have described them. So that's the low-hanging fruit. People can get into, oh, maybe they're from the future, maybe they're extra dimensional, maybe they're like ghosts or leprechauns, or the simple reality is they're extraterrestrial species.
Yeah.
They're beings like us.
But what do you think? What do you think is going to happen if they come and they kind of hover, put some of their big ships hovering over some of our cities? Are we finally going to get our act together then and stop shooting each other when we see that they're actually here and they're hanging? Or are people going to freak out, or what's going to happen?
No. I think that what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to have a responsible process by means of which we roll this information out to our people, and at the same time we start adjusting our existing structures here on the planet to move from these unjust, sinful structures that we have, favoring tiny percentage of the minority of the people on our planet, to the detriment of vast majorities of people all throughout the world. We've still got 10 million people a year starving to death on the planet. While we're having to throw food away. They're in the silos that are owned by the 7 major agribusiness corporations in order to maintain the high costs, the high level income they can get from it. So that, they're letting soybeans and corn and wheat rot in the silos. And they will not make it available to the people that are dying of starvation, even though they have no materials to exchange for it. So it's not interfering in the market system at all, because they have nothing to contribute to the market system. I actually had a meeting when I was at Jesuit headquarters when 10 million people had starved to death that one year, and Walter Cronkite had gotten on CBS News, had gotten really upset about this and was talking about this all the time. So the World Bank convened a meeting in Washington, D.C., and I was at the headquarters of the Jesuit Order, and that we were asked to send someone to the meeting. So the president of the World Bank was there and others to have this discussion. I go to the meeting on behalf of the Jesuit Order, right, as their general counsel in the social ministry office, and I'm seated at the table with the president of Ralston Purina, one of the major agribusiness corporations, and the president of the American Cattlemen's Association, right? And so we're all here to have this big meeting, and they hold the meeting at Blackie's Beef House in Washington, D.C., where they serve marbled steaks for the dinner, which they're feeding them wheat in grains to fatten up the cows, while other people are starving to death around the world. And so and they were all pretending they were there to try to figure out what to do about this. So finally I stood up and I said, wait a second. In light of the fact that Ralston Purina and Cargill and the other major agribusiness corporations have tens of thousands of tons of foodstuff, wheat and barley and oats and corn and other things, all stored in these silos, which they have to hold out of the market in order to maintain the price on the market for their goods. And then you've got 10 million people starving to death. Why don't we just take the excess food that's never going to go into the food supply anyhow and provide it to them? And the president of the World Bank stood there staring, and he said, well, wait a second. He says, you can't just take that and give it to those people. That belongs to Ralston Purina and Cargill. And even if we at the World Bank were to give those people a loan to purchase it from them, how are they going to pay the 6.5% interest on the loan?
It's so
that's what he said to me. I swear to God, that's exactly what he said to me.
Yeah.
So that kind of a structure in their head that is advantaging 0.1% of the population on our planet is a sinful structure, and it has to be amended.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's the kind of thing that's contributing to the potentials of a thermonuclear war, fighting over continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials of the planet. And that's in the 1992 United States Defense Department policy planning guidance document that was crafted by the George H.W. Bush administration immediately in the face of Gorbachev withdrawing from the Cold War back on December 31st of 1991. Said, this is over. This is totally crazy for us to be doing this. I'm stepping back. And I'm releasing all the Soviet socialist republics that they can establish whatever kind of government they want. And I'm willing to engage in the disassembling of the nuclear warheads. of all of our arsenals. And panic seized the George H.W. Bush administration.
Yes, yes.
And the Secretary of Defense, who was Dick Cheney at the time, convenes a meeting with Paul Wolfowitz, his deputy, and Doug Fife and Scooter Libby and Richard Pearl and the guys that were inside the Defense Department. And they prepare the 1992 United States Defense Department Policy Planning Guidance document that advocates that what we do, rather than step back out of the Cold War and redesign our economy to have a peaceful economy, that what we should do is we should take steps to establish full spectrum military dominance over the planet.
Yeah.
And it says so in the document. And the purpose of that,
I mean, NATO should have been dismantled at that point. It had
absolutely.
no point,
no rationale for it.
No rationale for it. So I mean, there was a true window of opportunity for.
And we were deeply involved in that at Jesuit headquarters. We were the ones having meetings with Gorbachev to get him to do that. So we knew exactly what it was that was happening there. And when we were confronted by the response that the Bush administration had, and then you go back and you say just quickly that here's George H.W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, President of the United States, and his Defense Department people under Dick Cheney, deciding that they wanted to be able to project full military dominance on the planet for the purpose of maintaining, quote, their continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials needed by our industrial state. Okay, that's what it says. All right. And George H.W. Bush, it's not coincidental that the refusal on our part to engage with Gorbachev in disassembling the nuclear warheads was because, as Gorbachev told us when we met with him, the United States will never initiate that. He said, because they believe that they have to maintain their nuclear weapons. Why? Not against us, he said, against China. Because China showed them in Korea that they could put 1 billion men in uniform into the field. This is Gorbachev speaking to us. My deputy at the Jesuit headquarters, Dr. James Garrison, meeting face to face with Gorbachev, and he tells him that. Okay, and so the United States refuses to do it. Why? Because they are part of the China lobby that believes that we're going to exploit the natural resources of Asia. Okay, and it tracks all the way back to Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers Harriman was the investment group of the robber barons that had gathered, and there was 20 families that had established control over the railroads and the steel industry and the cattle industry and shipping and all of that, that they were all investment partners in Brown Brothers Harriman. And who's the CEO of Brown Brothers Harriman at that time? George Herbert Walker, of George Herbert Walker Bush, the grandfather of George H.W. Bush, and the great-grandfather of George Walker Bush. And they are the ones that set up the Union Bank of New York and funded the construction of the international headquarters of the Third Reich in Germany. And funded
it gets worse and worse.
and funded Adolf Hitler's rise to power in Germany to be the bulwark against Bolshevism in Europe, while they turned their attention westward into the Pacific to lay claim to the Hawaiian Islands and Guam and start moving out into Asia. And that was the development of the Asian market by the China lobby, the head of which was George Herbert Walker Bush. And who was legal counsel for the Brown Brothers Harriman? Allen Dulles, right? Who became the first civilian director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Okay, so people need to understand that there's a simple structure in place that is fundamentally unjust. It is what I discovered when I came out into the world of law and practicing law, of discovering that there are these sinful structures in place. And what we need to do in the context of encountering an extraterrestrial civilization that is billions of years in advance of us, that we need to reorganize the structures of our planet, our geopolitical structures, our economic structures, to be fair and to relieve us of the danger of self-imposed thermonuclear destruction, destroying the flora and fauna of our planet, which is a very important resource for our galaxy. People need to understand this. and that's part of what we're doing at the New Paradigm Institute. In addition
A
to
gradual and responsible disclosure is what you're advocating.
That's exactly right. And at the same time, helping to construct the new paradigm. What are the alternative structures look like that are fair and honest and guarantee peace in the world? And so that we can have a peaceful relationship and a mutually productive relationship, not only with each other on the planet, but with the extraterrestrial organizations. Okay? And this is perfectly rational that we're talking about. And yet they've been devoted, the national security state has been devoted to convincing people that anybody who believes that UFOs are real is mentally ill and needs to get a psychiatric exam and lose their position in their security clearances in government and be fired from whatever jobs they have, their families destroyed. That's all provable. And so what we're at is a moment of inflection. The word you hear going on around a lot right now. But what we've got to do is take advantage of this particular unique moment in history when things are all getting kicked up into the air and kind of the structures are kind of coming loose here. What we have to do is reassemble these structures in a fair and honest way on our planet so that it entitles us to respect, so that we're not involved in trying to figure out how to weaponize their technology and move our nuclear weapons out into outer space to use against them. You know, this has got to stop now. Yeah. This is the opportunity that we have. That's what the New Paradigm Institute exists for. And that's why we are designated in the Senate bill as one of the groups that is to nominate people to this 9-person panel.
Good.
That's our New Paradigm Institute. It's listed there as the UAP Disclosure Fund.
Do you know if there are any more whistleblowers in the pipeline now?
Yes, there are. There are a lot. There are a lot of additional whistleblowers, and we're moving them systematically before the staff of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We're trying to get the House Oversight Committee, involved in the same process of interviewing some of these people. The Aero Office is totally distrusted. It's under the complete control of the Defense Department and the intelligence community officially, who are the very people who've been lying to the Congress for decades about this. So that's not going to go anywhere, and none of the whistleblowers trust them. So we've got to get our 15-page, New Paradigm Institute drafted, enhanced UFO whistleblower protection statute. We've introduced it. We've given it to the people at the House of Representatives to pass into law to protect the whistleblowers so they can be made public, and that whole public process is going on right now. Yeah. So I'm meeting with the people in the task force. I'm flying back into Washington on the 24th of March. I'm going to be meeting with them. I'm going to be meeting with people very high up in the administration, the new administration, to get them on board to participate in this restructuring that has to go on right now. In ferreting out the operatives of this deep state, which is the legacy program of the UFO program.
By the way, are you privy to what the initiative Skywatcher is doing? Are they close to collecting physical evidence? I think that's what they're up to.
They're in the process of trying to do that. I'm concerned about this because the question is what the source of private funding is that's being supplied to them. And what are they going to be expecting in return? That these are private investors that we're talking about here.
Yes.
And just like that people kind of blinked it, but the fact is that when Jake Barber testified about what he was doing, recovering the craft, he was working for a private aerospace corporation. He wasn't doing this in his capacity as a United States military person. He was selling his skills to a private aerospace corporation. Now, what do you think they're engaged in? You think they're engaged in some kind of eleemosynary public interest endeavor? No, they're not. What they want to do is they want to get people who have psychic abilities, bring them in, and try to lure in UFOs so they can knock them down and seize them and get access to their technology, so they can make weapon systems which they can sell to the government for billions of dollars of contracts. This is a sinful structure, in that, unless and until we can be guaranteed that that endeavor, the Skywatch endeavor, is dedicated to the public interest rather than to the private financial interests of the investors in that, that I'm going to continue to be extremely concerned about what it is that they're doing, and who they're doing it for.
I never thought of that, but that's a good point. Yeah,
it has to be part of a process by means of which any information that is gathered is brought into a responsibly controlled disclosure process that can run concomitantly with adjusting our structures in our on our planet to be able to absorb the information, to adjust to it, so that it doesn't generate an ontological shock throughout all of our systems, including the religious community.
Yeah.
It's got to be brought along in this process. That's what the New Paradigm Institute is here to do, and that's why I'm happy to get to talk with you and some others, as you mentioned, to explain the depth of what the opportunity is that we have here, and that we need to take advantage of if this is going to be done properly.
Danny Sheehan, so where should people go now if they want to learn more? We have talked about the New Paradigm Institute, and that's the place to go. I suppose are there other sites that you could?
Yeah, newparadigminstitute.org. Okay, and you can also check on there. You find Citizens for Disclosure. You can sign up. You go to newparadigminstitute.org, and there's a link there. You can sign up to be a member of the Citizens for Disclosure in your own congressional district. And we're going to also divide it into electoral districts or precincts, so that there'll be precinct captains and things just like a regular structured organization, so that we can have a maximum effect upon the congressional members to get them to live up to their constitutional responsibility. They've been blinking this responsibility for decades. Back in 1991, when we had the major press conference at the National Press Building, I brought the commanding officer of the Amalgam nuclear missile site up in Montana to sit down with his congressperson to tell him face to face about the UFO that came over and shut off all 10 of the nuclear missiles, right? And he told the congressman said, yes, we know about this up here, but we don't dare talk about this publicly because our particular political career will be destroyed.
Yeah.
People will send millions of dollars into our campaigns against us and unseat us. And so we have to be very, very careful. But what kind of a situation is that to have? That Congress people are terrified of some secret group that is going to be funneling money into their campaigns to get rid of them if they try to deal with this. Okay? And so the bottom line is that the New Paradigm Institute is organizing the people around the country, educating the people around the country,
and internationally as well, I suppose.
Pardon?
Internationally as well.
Oh yes, yeah. There's over 24 countries already that we're talking with, trying to get their parliament to pass legislation like the legislation that we're passing now. Okay, we need to get everybody on board this. So this isn't a United States thing, where the United States government is going to be the ones that disclose this to the whole world. And
I don't think the ETs care about the nation-state borders.
We have to share this, and we have to get the information out. We have to all participate in amending our social and economic and political and religious structures in such a way that we can accommodate this new information. Okay, and that we can have a healthy and prosperous society on our planet, working in cooperation with the extraterrestrial civilization. And people have a hard time even talking about this because they're still afraid. They're still afraid of talking about these obvious things that are true, because they've been threatened in the past, with destroying their careers and being told that they're somehow crazy for believing in things like this. That is a major propaganda campaign that's been waged unconstitutionally against our entire people in our country by our national security state people who are in bed with the private aerospace corporations. And that is just true. And so we have to figure out, therefore, what do we do about it? We don't have to run and jump out of a first-story window somewhere, and then pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and figure out that we're helpless to do anything. We can do this. We are at a time and place where we can do this right now. And people may not trust the Trump administration to do this, but they've declared that they're willing to expose this information. They've declared that they want to dig out the deep state and get rid of it and stop the corruption in our government. Fine, fine. We're going to assume for the sake of the argument that they're telling the truth, and we're going to offer to cooperate.
Until proven otherwise.
That's right. So that's what we're doing. So it's newparadigminstitute.org. And sign up to become a member of the Citizens for Disclosure. It's totally free, and you'll get all the information. We'll craft the stuff for you. We'll give it to you. We'll assist you in writing letters to the editor, to your local newspaper, going on your local cable television programs, how to meet with your local religious leaders about this. We've got a place in Florida where we've been invited to do a high school assembly, to actually gather the high school kids together and tell them about what's going on, so that they can start being prepared. And we've got meetings with people from the universities right now. We've done a major lecture at Yale to their faculty and students there. We've got the Ohio State University. A professor there is organizing a thing called the Visible College, so that we can try to get the courses put into the universities to start teaching our students about this, so that they're prepared to move into a world that's real, rather than the strange, unjust world that they are reluctant to even participate in now.
Yeah, fabulous. Danny Sheehan, thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure having you on the show, and good luck now with fascinating and important work. Keep it up.
Thank you, Anders. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. Thank you.
The JFK files is something that I was perhaps going to ask you about, but you weren't directly involved in that case, were you? Because that was before your time, or maybe you were in the aftermath of it.
As it turns out, it wasn't before my time. Actually, the assassination took place, obviously, in November of 1963.
Yes.
I was just a freshman in college at that time. But after I completed college at Harvard College and then Harvard Law School, I ended up getting recruited to the law firm of attorney F. Lee Bailey in 1972, when the Watergate burglary took place.
Yeah.
And it turns out that the Watergate burglary was directly connected to the Kennedy assassination. People don't understand that, but the bottom line is it was, and the reality is that I was brought on with F. Lee Bailey's office. He was representing James McCord, who was the CIA wiretapping specialist who was arrested in the Watergate Hotel, along with three Cuban anti-Castro Santos Traficante gunmen from Havana, Cuba, that people didn't like to talk about. But when I was brought on to Bailey's firm and asked to look into this, it turns out that F. Lee Bailey was the attorney for Santos Traficante. So we were able to interview Santos Traficante, and he explained to us what they were doing in the Watergate Hotel. That they had come in to wiretap the telephones and bug the office electronically of Larry O'Brien, who had just been made the head of the Democratic National Committee. And this was because Richard Nixon, who was running for his reelection in 1972, after having been elected originally in 1968, he was running for reelection. And when Larry O'Brien was made the head of the Democratic National Committee, Nixon freaked out, because it turns out that immediately prior to being the head of the Democratic National Committee, Larry O'Brien had been for 20 years chief lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for Howard Hughes, the multi-billionaire, who it turns out was a secret consultant to the National Security Council back in 1960, when Richard Nixon was the vice president. And right. Richard Nixon, when he was vice president, as soon as he realized he was going to be the nominee for the Republican presidential nomination in 1960, Richard Nixon secretly contacted Howard Hughes via the secret telephone of the National Security Council 5412 committee and ask Howard Hughes to put together an assassination team to keep it completely away from the White House, but to set up a political assassination team to kill Fidel Castro and Raul Castro, his brother, and Che Guevara. And it turns out that
Operation Mongoose, was it?
That was Mongoose. Yes, Operation Mongoose. But at that time, it was still Operation 40 under Richard Nixon. That was the code name for it. And Richard Nixon had Howard Hughes, since Nixon was convinced he was going to become president, because he was going to get the nomination now. He contacted Howard Hughes the day that Nelson Rockefeller actually withdrew from the presidential campaign for the nomination for the Republican Party. And when Nixon knew that he was going to be the nominee, he was convinced he was going to win. And so he contacted Howard Hughes via the secret telephone of the National Security Council's 5412 committee and asked him to put together this assassination team. And Howard Hughes assigned that task to one of his lawyers, Robert Mayhew. And Bob Mayhew, in turn, went to a man by the name of Johnny Roselli, who was the bagman for the mafia for the Las Vegas casinos. And you remember that that's where Howard Hughes was. I think it was in the Sands Hotel. He had the suite, the top suite there. Bottom line is, Howard Hughes's lawyer, Bob Mayhew, went to Johnny Roselli, the bagman for the mafia, and said, look, you guys in the mafia have your own reasons for wanting to get rid of Castro. He closed down all your gambling casinos. He closed down all your houses of prostitution. And most importantly, he shut down the heroin trafficking. It was coming in through Southeast Asia because Batista, who was the dictator there prior to Fidel Castro, was partners with Santos Trafficante in the heroin trafficking. And so when Johnny Roselli was contacted by Bob Mayhew and asked to get his people to set up an assassination team, bottom line is he had to go, Johnny Roselli had to go to his principal, who was Sam Giancana in Chicago, and pitch this thing to him, saying, Nixon's getting set to be president. He wants this assassination team put together. He's contacted Hughes to do this, so it's completely away from the White House. And so that I'm coming to you now, to Sam Giancana, to see if we can do this. Giancana said, well, wait a second. That's Trafficante's territory. He's the Don of Havana in the mafia down there. So we have to go down and consult with him. And they did in September of 1960. This all happened in June of 1960. And then by September, they were sitting down with Trafficante. Trafficante agreed to do that. And he selected 15 men who had fled with him out of Havana, Cuba, in January of 1959, when Batista was overthrown by Fidel Castro. And the mafia guys all moved out, and they came up to Florida, to Tampa and Miami. And so what happened is Trafficante selected 15 men who were his gunmen from down in Havana, who are now up in Miami and Tampa. But they had been recruited by Richard Nixon to participate in Operation 40, to go in and blow up bridges and burn sugar fields and poison sugar shipments and stuff that were being sent out around the world to try to destroy the economy of Cuba under Fidel Castro. So Trafficante put together that assassination team to kill Fidel Castro. And it turns out that's the team that killed the president. And the bottom line is that when Bob Mayhew, what happened when Richard Nixon was later president in 1968 and was running for re-election in 1972, when Larry O'Brien was made the head of the Democratic National Committee to challenge him in the election, Nixon was terrified that somehow Larry O'Brien, as the chief lobbyist for Howard Hughes, had discovered that it was Richard Nixon that actually put together the assassination team that ended up killing the president. Major political rival. And he was terrified that Larry O'Brien might know about this and might be wanting to use it against him in his campaign. And so what he did is he had the plumbers unit, the White House plumbers unit, go in and burglarize his office and wiretap his telephone and electronically bug his office so Nixon could find out whether Bob Mayhew knew about this and was going to use it against him. And that's the smoking gun conversation. The famous smoking gun conversation. The burglary got caught on the 17th of June of 1972. And on the 21st of June, just 4 days later, Bob Haldeman, the chief of staff for Nixon, comes into his office, not knowing that the recordings were going, but comes into the office and says, Mr. President, I think we've got a problem here. He says that Pat Gray, the new head of the FBI, just contacted John Dean, our White House legal counsel, and said that the FBI is now wanting to investigate a bank down in Mexico City because Bernard Barker, one of the burglars, had been found with a number of $100 bills, sequentially numbered $100 bills inside his jacket pocket when he was arrested. And they tracked these $100 bills back into Banco Internacional down in Mexico City. And it turns out that that money had come out of an account that was set up back in 1960 to fund the assassination training base that was based down in Oaxaca, Mexico, on the ranch of a fellow by the name of Clint Murchison Jr.
So when you were involved in the Watergate thing, there, all of this surfaced again. This is what you got to know when you dug into that material.
That's right. We uncovered all this because Santos Trafficante, when I was saying, what the hell are three Trafficante gunmen doing in the Watergate Hotel with this CIA wiretapping guy? And so since it turns out Trafficante was Bailey's client, we got to interview him in detail. And it was under this attorney-client conversation that we had with him, completely off the record. And he had absolutely no reason to lie. And it turns out that F. Lee Bailey was on Index 4. He was one of the 4 attorneys that were retained on retainer to represent any CIA person who was caught engaged in a covert operation stateside, which is completely illegal for them to do that. And so that because Bailey was a CIA lawyer, basically unbeknownst to us at the firm, and Trafficante was a partner in the heroin trade down in Havana, not only with Batista, the dictator, but their third partner was a fellow by the name of Paul Helliwell, who was a full-time CIA operations officer who was running a thing called the Sea Supply Corporation, which was the Southeast Asia Supply Corporation, and a percentage of the heroin profits that were being generated by this partnership of Batista and Santos Trafficante and Paul Helliwell, a portion of the profits were being filtered off to buy weapons and explosives to be smuggled to the Kuomintang in China by the Central Intelligence Agency. And that whole operation was going on. I found out all about this. Here I am.
And I was going to ask you. It sounds like a Hollywood movie, and I was going to ask about Oliver Stone. How close to the truth was he in his JFK movie?
Well, he had gotten a piece of it.
Yeah.
He had found out
because Cuba is involved there. I mean, the whole Cuba thing. And
that's right. That's a free Cuba group that was down in New Orleans,
and they recruited Oswald at some point.
That's right. And Oswald was one of the guys that was working with Guy Bannister and David Ferry and those guys in New Orleans to supply military equipment to one of the anti-Castro Cuban refugee paramilitary bases that was at the northern end of Lake Pontchartrain, right out of New Orleans. There were 5 of these. There was one on No Name Key in Florida, one on Swan Island, one in the Everglades, one at the southern tip of Lake Pontchartrain, and one at the northern tip. And Guy Bannister and the guys that Oswald was working with were supplying military equipment to the anti-Castro Cubans, and the whole thing was setting up Lee Oswald to look like he was a sympathizer of the Cubans, of Fidel Castro, in the Fair Play for Cuba committee, right? That whole thing was a setup, and then they were getting Lee Harvey Oswald to take a shot at the Kennedy caravan in November of 1963, so he could get caught, and then he would look like it was Fidel Castro trying to assassinate the president, so the military guys in the CIA could justify invading Cuba again. This was a whole plan that they had going. But when Lee Harvey Oswald, he wasn't,
which didn't go so well.
Yeah, and Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't supposed to kill the president. He was just to shoot at the caravan, which he did. He shot the first shot, and then, much to his total surprise, there was a whole team of 15 assassins that were all organized through the task force, all laid out around Dealey Plaza, and slaughtered the president. That's why Oswald ran away, trying to escape, and ended up killing Tippit, the Dallas police officer who was sent to kill him, and killed him, and got arrested actually for killing Tippit. That's what happened. I mean, he was under arrest for killing Tippit, and they began interrogating him, and he started saying, "Wait a second, something's gone wrong here. I'm just a patsy here. I need legal help. I need legal help." And he actually asked to have a telephone call made that night from the Dallas Police Department, and it was to his handler, that he had been trained in a thing called Operation Redskin when he was in the Marine Corps. Long involved story, but he was working for a thing called Field Operations Intelligence, working, with don't need all of them, but William D. Pauley was funding it, E.H. Hunt was funding it, and George Willoughby, who was the G2 for MacArthur. This is a very complicated story, but it's all extraordinarily detailed.
Yeah.
And I found out all about it.
So is all of this going to come up to the surface now when the White House is Trump administration is releasing all these documents?
Yeah, I just briefed yesterday the task force, the task force on declassifying government secrets. That's been put together by the House Oversight Committee. One of the tasks they have is investigating the Kennedy assassination and declassifying the documents. That's why they're coming out now. Yesterday. Well, I met with them yesterday morning and explained this whole thing to them, and I'm going to be meeting again with them on the 25th of this month.
So do you think they're going to release all of the documents, or are they still going to cover up some?
It's not clear yet. They released 50,000 of them yesterday. They're going to be releasing another 30,000 of them later today at 5 o'clock Eastern time. We're in the process of going through these right now, looking to see if we can dig out the documents. Of course, they're not going to have a memo around saying, "Oh, by the way, we're planning to kill the president." But the bottom line is there's lots of other documents that are going to be verifying pieces of what we know about.
Yeah, and every person has a code name, right?
Which person?
Every person that is mentioned in these documents.
Yes. So,
which makes it complicated as well.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but the documents are numbered, but they're not described in any way. Yeah. They just have these long numbers, like 104-2335-1234. And they don't tell you what they are. They're not in any particular chronological order. So we're in the process right now of trying to apply AI to the documents to see if we're going to get them all printed out and then see if we can search them. But we're engaged in that process as we speak. That's what I was temporarily distracted doing.
Yes, well, fantastic. Thank you for telling us all of that, because I mean, it's a fascinating story. Everybody's interested in that as well. But I was thinking we were going to talk about UFOs, and we're going to do that.
We are, because they're not unrelated.
I know they're related as well. Okay, yeah, everything's related. So,
well, not everything, but this particular thing is that Kennedy ordered after the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred in October of 1962. He and Nikita Khrushchev were so totally freaked out by how close they came to a complete thermonuclear exchange to destroy all of human civilization, basically, that the two of them began secretly communicating. there was a series of totally secret letters that were being carried back and forth between Khrushchev and Kennedy by a fellow by the name of Norman Cousins, who was delivering these letters back and forth. And in those letters, Kennedy and Khrushchev were planning together to order the disassembling of all the warheads of the nuclear arsenals, and to destroy the warheads, to back away from this ever again having a chance of destroying the entire world. And they were working out how they were going to do this. And on June 5th of 1963, Kennedy contacted John Mack, the new CIA director, and directed him to brief JFK on all the UFO information, because Kennedy and Khrushchev had worked out this deal that while disassembling all the nuclear warheads of the two arsenals, they were going to replace the economic impact of stepping back from the Cold War and stopping the massive spending in the nuclear area. And they were going to establish a joint Soviet and United States space program. And that was how they were going to recover from the economic impact of stopping the Cold War. They were going to be having a joint session, a joint space exploration program.
And of course, 5 days later, Kennedy held his famous speech at American University.
George Washington University.
World
That's
Peace.
Right. That's right. And this is what he was doing behind the scenes. And he demanded to get the information about UFOs because he was going to give that to Khrushchev as a sign of good faith, that he was genuinely going to be joining together in a space program with the Soviet Union and let them know that the United States knew that the UFOs were real, and that there was definitely, an extraterrestrial civilization around us that we were going to have to jointly cope with as the partners in the new space program. And it was him demanding that information from the CIA that tipped them that he was having these secret conversations through this completely non-authorized channel with Khrushchev. And when Alan Dulles found out about this, even though he was no longer the CIA director, but he was still in Washington, D.C., and he had loyalists inside the CIA. And as soon as they got that request on June 5th from Kennedy, knowing that he was going to share this with Khrushchev, they uncovered the fact that he had this secret line of communication going and realized that they were getting set to disassemble the nuclear warheads of the United States nuclear arsenal. And the China lobby was not going to allow that to happen. The China lobby was this extremely powerful group of American business people that basically housed in the Brown Brothers Harriman private investment group. They were all investment members of Brown Brothers Harriman, and Alan Dulles was legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman, where the China lobby resided. Okay, and they said they cannot allow the nuclear arsenal to be disassembled because they knew that the United States could not have a traditional land war with China, because China had already demonstrated in Korea, Incheon, that they could put 1 billion men in uniform and field them against the United States. And so the China lobby knew perfectly well that they could never confront China in a traditional war. So they needed to preserve the nuclear weapons to use against China. And so that it was a desperate situation when they discovered that Kennedy was actually in a position to order the disassembly of the nuclear warheads in the U.S. Nuclear arsenal.
So we got a lot of internal enemies there.
And that's what triggered it. What triggered it was his demand to be briefed in on all the UFO information, which he could share with Khrushchev. So it wasn't that the president was killed because he was demanding the UFO information. He was killed because when he demanded the UFO information and was in the process of trying to give it to Khrushchev as a sign of good faith, and they're entering into this new joint Soviet and U.S. space program to replace the disassembly of the nuclear arsenals. It was the disassembly of the nuclear arsenals that got him killed. And Alan Dulles thereafter greenlighted the S-Force assassination team to go kill him, which they wanted to do anyhow, because there were all these anti-Castro, rabid anti-communist people who felt that they'd been totally betrayed by Kennedy.
Yeah.
Not because of the Bay of Pigs, but because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Immediately following the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy ordered them to shut down all of their private nuclear or private anti-Castro bases. These 5 bases I told you about.
Mm-hmm.
Kennedy actually ordered them to shut down, and they refused. They actually, Frank Sturgis, who was the CIA liaison to the anti-Castro base that was on No Name Key, after being ordered by the president and the attorney general, Robert Kennedy, to stand down, he launched another attack on Cuba and actually sank a Russian ship in the harbor in Cuba, totally busting the agreement that Kennedy had now established with Khrushchev to stop doing all this, right? And so it jeopardized the entire dynamic of the relationship between Kennedy and Khrushchev. And so Kennedy ordered in U.S. Marshals, 6 helicopter gunships of U.S. Marshals into No Name Key, and burnt out their entire base and arrested all those guys, arrested all those anti-Castro Cuban guys, and charged them with a violation of the Neutrality Act. Now, he released them a week later, but it was basically a shot across the bow by Kennedy that you can't do this anymore. But Howard Hughes, who was the CIA liaison over in the Everglades, he started preparing a second attack against Cuba to try to instigate a fallout with the Soviet Union. And Kennedy found out about that, and they sent in the same U.S. Marshals on 6 helicopter gunships and burnt out the base in the Everglades. Now, it's important because you look at who the 2 CIA liaison guys were. One was Frank Sturgis over on No Name Key, and the other one was E. Howard Hunt over in the Everglades. Those were the 2 guys in the Watergate burglary, along with the 3 gunmen from Trafficante, who were part of the S-Force. They were actually members of the 15-person S-Force assassination team, and they were in the DNC headquarters in order to find out whether Lawrence O'Brien found out about the fact that it was Richard Nixon who had created the assassination team that ended up killing the president. Because Nixon knew if that got out, he'd never be able to explain his way out of it. He would never be able to prove to anybody in time to win the election that he hadn't ordered the assassination of
and
his
he was right about that, of course.
rival. Okay, so this is the relationship between the UFO secret information that we had, that he was demanding to get, and the assassination itself. But it wasn't the proximate cause of it. It was an ancillary cause, but it was only because it revealed the secret negotiations that Kennedy and Khrushchev were having about disassembling the nuclear warheads. That's what happened.
Fascinating.
So that's why I was
62 years later, almost, we finally find out about this. Hopefully, I mean, everybody will.
Yeah.
Hello, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.